Hello and welcome to a spooky edition of Talking Tropes. I'm Hannah.
I'm David. Happy Halloween.
Woo!
We're talking about some spooky Halloween animation today.
Yeah.
Specifically the stop motiony spooky type of
Yeah.
animation.
Specifically the Tim Burton slash Henry Selick stop motion spooky animations that we all know and love. Everything from Corpse Bride to Nightmare Before Christmas. It's not just called Halloween Town. That's a different movie.
That's a
Um,
different movie.
that's a different
Still
one,
Disney.
Hannah. Nightmare Before Christmas, Coraline, Frankenweenie. We're doing the whole Burton Selleck gambit.
Right. And I think we want to kind of, in the same way that we did when we talked about puppets and that medium and
Yeah,
what its purpose is, to kind of get to the heart of what is stop motion and what's it for and why is it so spooky now? Because it wasn't
it's
always
so
that way in the United States.
spooky. I think there's still some stop motion that we see that is not spooky, but I would agree that it's a medium that over time has certainly had a spooky drift to it, wouldn't
It's
you say?
spooks in the drift.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think why don't we start with just the history of Tim Burton? I thought that
Okay,
might be a
yeah.
good place to start. Where
Kick
does he
us
come
off.
from? Did he come from the land of Wonderland? Did he come from the chocolate factory? Where is he from?
Uh, he's just from a place, isn't he?
He
Um,
he came out of Cal Arts, the
yeah.
California Art College, and he was in the same class this is many of the same classes as Henry Selick, and they, you know, came to know each other and respect each other's work doing spooky stop motion stuff. Uh,
There you go.
and Tim Burton actually produced his first short film was in stop motion. His thesis film, which was called Vincent, and it was about a young boy who thought he was Vincent Price and who tried to resurrect the dead and read gothic poetry and did all
Classic.
kinds of spooky Universal monster movie stuff
Yeah.
as Vincent Price, and it was narrated
Truly.
by Vincent Price.
Oh, he got Vincent Price to narrate,
Yeah,
like,
I
or
mean he's in California. He's
yeah, but
at this very
still.
prestigious school. You just put out a casting call that's like, hey, anybody know Vincent Price?
Sorry, I've never been to film school. I don't know how these things work.
But that was Tim Burton's first foray into stop motion animation, and he wanted his first live action film to be a stop motion animation film. That was the original Frankenweenie back
Yes.
in '85. But he decided for budget reasons that it would be easier to do it in live action. Uh, that is until almost 30 years later or so,
Yeah.
which is when he decided to make Frankenweenie the way it was originally intended,
Yeah. Yeah.
as stop motion.
Though it's great because the original Frankenweenie features in the stop motion Frankenweenie, which I always found delightful.
In what way? I missed
Isn't
that.
it the like film that we see? It's got like the original like they watch it at some point or something. Like they watch the film at one point, the original
Oh,
Frankenweenie.
I must have missed that. Yeah.
um but yeah, so boom, he's making some stuff. All right, so he's graduated, he's getting out into the world, making some movies. When do we get to the Nightmare Before Christmas of it all?
Right. Well, I mean, before that, he sort of made a name for himself, Tim Burton, in
Yeah.
the world of live action. He did Pee Wee's Great Adventure, he did Batman, and then he met up with his old friend Henry Selick and said, "Let's do this animation thing together. I'll produce, you direct, because I don't like interacting with filmmakers on set. I'm too shy. So
I'm
you
too
handle all that
weird.
stuff, and I'll just, you know, sketch some
Emo
ragdoll
shit.
lady and boogaboo, and they'll do some spooky shit.
A
But
Henry
yeah,
Selick shit
so
sounds great.
this was like the one of the first major uh, stop motion films that Disney ever produced.
Mm-hmm.
It was, you know, pretty huge budget. It was shot on film, which, you know, today we think of uh, all stop motion as being sort of a digital filmmaking
Right.
thing. You know, you take the pictures on a digital camera and then you line them up in the digital camera. You can see them right there, and you can
Right.
make little animations. You know, there's even apps that you can download now that can just do that automatically.
Right.
Put up the little onion skin of the previous shot so you can line them up and make it
Mm-hmm.
all pretty. But back then, no, you couldn't even see what the shots looked like,
You have
other
to get
than
them
just
developed.
they needed to be, yeah, they needed to be developed, and that took hours, and that's on top of the just minute, tiny details of moving things around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so just like a little bit about like the process of making these figures. They were all hand sculpted. They had, you know, head swapping was like the main way that they did like lip flap motion. So that means they had to produce a different head for every frame of animation that the head could possibly use, which ends up being, you know, a few hundred heads
Yeah.
for all the characters. I think it's like 800 heads
Damn.
for Jack Skellington. It's a lot of different
It's a
heads.
lot of heads.
But of course, the weird thing about The Nightmare Before Christmas is it was marketed as Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas,
Yeah.
not as Henry Selick's. So there's an immediate there's a rift.
Well, they continue to work together on several more films, so it can't have been that big of a rift.
I don't think that they actually do work together in any further films after
Really?
that.
Not even on Corpse Bride?
No, Corpse Bride did not have Henry Selick involved,
Oh.
as far as I could tell. Maybe he consulted or something, but I didn't see him on the in the credits.
All right. Sorry, Henry Selick.
And then Coraline was just Henry Selick, no Tim Burton whatsoever. And it's interesting because in Coraline you see the cat, which looks almost identical to the cat in the opening scene of The Nightmare Before Christmas, and it's sort of like that's his character. I
Yeah.
own this cat.
This cat's
This is not your
mine.
cat, Tim.
I love it. I love it. You know, because black cats are definitely just a thing that, you know, only one person can
Right.
have.
And then of course Frankenweenie is still Tim Burton, but no, Henry Selick
Yeah.
did not work on that one either. So
Yeah.
yeah, they never. I don't think they ever collaborated again. Maybe there was really a rift that formed. I don't know.
Okay.
I can't tell from interviews whether they hate each other or still respect each other.
Yeah, but definitely, you know, the marketing becomes Tim Burton, and then his name sort of becomes synonymous with this style.
Right. The uh new spooky stop motion animation. But
Right.
do you think that like spooky stop motion existed before Tim? Was there a pre-Tim world of spooky stop motion?
I mean, there must have been, you know, I don't think there was necessarily a mainstream spooky stop motion
Right. It was
pre-Tim.
mostly short films, indie films,
Art house
and also you
stuff.
have to, you know, think about the international cinemas
Mhm.
of animation, because stop motion has never been a huge part of American animation, but it was always huge in Germany, in the Czech Republic,
Mhm.
in the long history of the USSR and all of the Eastern Bloc states. Um, Lots of history there.
Yeah.
I'm personally most familiar with uh, Czech animator Jan Svankmajer, who did an adaptation of Alice in Wonderland that used like little taxidermy animals.
Oh, whoa.
And there's yeah, so they have a lot more history of spookiness and stop motion than we do. I think in
Yeah.
America, what did you most associate stop motion with in films prior to 1993.
I mean, probably most people would have said Wallace and Gromit, or
Right, so that's the
like,
UK cinemas, which is
yeah,
also different. They have a
yeah.
totally different style to anything that
Hmm.
we have here. In fact, they're using actual clay, or maybe not actual clay, but
At one
it
point.
it looks like clay. It
Yeah,
moves like clay.
right.
I was gonna say Gumby, which is
Oh
the,
yeah,
you know,
Gumby is a big
so
one.
cheap television animation
Yeah,
is sort of what we associate stop motion with. That and another kind of cheap television animation, the Rankin Bass holiday specials, like
right,
Rudolph the Red-Nosed
exactly.
Reindeer.
Yeah.
Uh, what are some other ones?
Santa Claus is coming to town, The Year Without a Santa Claus. Is there a Frosty the Snowman one?
Of course,
Maybe
there's a
there's not.
Frosty the Snowman, but that one was not stop motion. That was
Okay. Well, no, that wasn't Rankin Bass. Yeah.
no, I think it
Um,
was Rankin Bass.
oh, was it? Whatever.
Anyway,
You all know what we're talking about. The shit that ABC Family, or excuse me, Freeform, runs on repeat during the 25 days of Christmas
right.
constantly.
Well, I mean, the whole point is that, yeah, if you do stop motion, as it's just like you make like 5 toys and then you kind of jiggle them around while putting different mouths on them, it's a pretty
Right.
cheap way to do a quick one-time special, because you
Right.
can reuse all the same figures and swap them out. But it becomes much more expensive when you're doing a feature-length film, first
Right.
of
Not
all.
just a 60-minute TV like special.
Right. And when you actually want them to move and to sing and to emote,
Right.
like
And
other animation, like cell animation is capable of,
right.
then you
And
really
in
have to
a
start breaking out the big bucks.
one specifically in a cinematic way, because the Rankin Bass characters certainly sing and whatnot, but it's not nearly as emotional or dramatic
Right.
or boarded
They don't
necessarily
really
as
change facial
this is.
expressions. They move their
Yeah,
eyebrows and they move their mouths because
yeah,
those are the movable pieces.
right. And even those sometimes look like they're animated in post, like I don't know how much of that was like on set movement.
I'm pretty sure they did actually have
Yeah.
different mouth, like, but they're
Okay.
like stickers
Like
almost. They
stickers.
just kind of
Yeah,
stick them on.
I would
Um,
believe that.
but I don't know actually. I'd have to
Yeah.
look that up.
No, because it definitely does. It just goes from O to
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they have
You
like
just
the
have a few lip
keyframes.
flaps that you can swap out, and
Right.
that's what you got. But you don't
But
have 800 heads to swap with
right, right,
different minute expressions and the in
right.
betweens of all those expressions.
And like the eyebrows of Jack Skellington and whatnot.
Right. Um, yeah, so I think that there is something kind of spooky about even those Christmas specials, that they
Really?
are kind of weird to look at and kind of uncomfortable. I don't know
Do
if other
you
people feel this way, but
do
it's
you
the
think
jerkiness of the motion.
do you feel like stop motion in general kind of lives in the uncanny valley?
Yeah, it's not that it's like the uncanny valley between like a cartoony representation and an overly realistic representation, but it's more of the uncanny that we did discuss in our Uncanny Valley episode,
Mm-hmm.
which is like Freud's psychoanalytic conception of the uncanny, where it's
Right.
something that's in motion but also still, and
Right.
it's sort of like almost like a reanimated corpse that you're looking at.
A reanimated corpse, you say? How spooky, David.
Well, this is a point that's also made by Jack Halberstam, who we cited for our Bridezilla episode, but I think I might have dead named him, but it's
Oh,
oops. But yeah, Jack Halberstam wrote this book called The Queer Art of Failure, where he's talking
okay.
about you know trying to take a look at like what is considered low art and art that is like about failure, and
Yeah.
sort of reading that through a queer lens, which I found really interesting. And
Yeah.
what he writes about stop motion is that it's a dynamic between motion and stillness, the dynamic between life and death, that is nowhere more dramatically captured than in stop motion. Toys come to life transformed from wooden to animated. And that's sort of like a common theme in Gothic literature as well.
Yeah.
Frankenstein, the monster that's made out of different pieces that move independently of each other
Mm-hmm.
and that move even though they don't look like they should be able to move.
Right.
That's kind
I
of a
mean,
dead thing.
yeah, like so there's I'm sure Jack Halberstam like talks about this as well in other literature that he's written, but you know, there are many critiques of the horror genre in general through a queer lens. And just like how easy it tends to be to read queerness into characters who are othered, and to read queerness into characters and genres about being monstrous and monstrousness. Like there was a lot of discourse specifically around The Shape of Water. And, you
Right.
know, like all of these women being like, yeah, it's about like straight women kind of being like, yes, it's about taming like a man and knowing that like you can turn the monster into like a someone who will love you. And you know, all the queer response to that was just like, what are you talking about? It's about loving and being loved despite the monstrousness. Like I am the
Right.
monster, you know. So I think like queerness and horror tend to just go hand in hand to begin with. And I think you're right though that the uncanny valleyness of it all that is sort of added on top with stop motion is just like another layer for these characters. And I think that's also part of why these characters became as popular as they did in the hot topic like emo scene in the 2000s and whatnot, you know. And
Right.
why a lot of like queer kind of alty other like teenagers went, this is weird and different and makes people uncomfortable in a way that isn't innately about my sexuality.
Right.
Great.
There's a performance of otherness in Halloween
Yeah.
itself,
Yeah.
and so it's become increasingly popular in feminist discourses and in queer discourses to
Mhm.
discuss Halloween and costuming and performance and
Mhm.
just the rejection of
The norm.
Christian values through the embrace of demonhood and witchhood.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all there, and I think Burton films, especially, or Selick films, this sort of spindly form of stop motion character with these grotesque faces and you know,
Fingers like snakes and
right,
spiders in my hair.
exactly. It's compelling in that sense.
Right. And also, of course, the first one that they do has to be Christmas themed because everyone's associations with stop motion are Santa Claus. So Santa
Right.
Claus shows up in this spooky world that's sort of like a mirror, dark mirror image of the wholesome Christian world of Christmas land,
Right.
Halloween town. The town of Halloween is a
Yeah.
dark reflection of that. But at the same time, can we read this as kind of a conservative story about how we must keep these things separate, about how there's no room for an overlap in the dark and the light, that we must
Oh
keep
yeah,
them
it's very much a stay in your lane story.
right. I mean, I've seen some people read it as kind of a story about cultural appropriation. That the issue isn't really
Mm.
that Jack Skellington wants to embrace the values of Christmas, but the issue is that he embraces the values of Christmas, and then all of his followers misunderstand, misinterpret, and misapply and try to force their own spooky ideology into Christmas. And so the toys become, tricks to
Right.
scare children instead of delights to make children feel joy. Uh,
Mhm.
so there's room for that interpretation as well, but I do see it as a largely conservative story at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the tension with Tim Burton films that I find is that he he makes he makes pretty conservative films, but he's always has this like, I'm just like a shy weirdo outsider, like no one could ever understand me kind of vibe. But you know, it's like still a very like straight white industry accepted man version of that, which I think tends to lead to these undertones of ultimately conservative tales.
Yeah, I don't know if I would generalize about all of his films that way. I think a lot of his films sort of resist that kind of interpretation because they're just so surface, like they're purely just we're going to stick a weirdo in suburban America or
Mm-hmm.
in Victorian London and just say what would how would people react to this weirdo? And so
Mm-hmm.
it's so surface that it doesn't even invite the under you know the underinterpretation of, oh, are we supposed to want this person to exist in this somewhat conservative space, or are we supposed to want them to leave because they could never be truly accepted there?
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of ambiguity is still present there.
Okay.
I do want to return to Halberstam for a second,
Yeah.
because he talks specifically about whether or not Coraline could be considered conservative,
Mm.
versus whether it's a progressive narrative.
Yeah.
And what he says is basically that the story is situating everything that's weird about this other world that Coraline, this girl, enters, where she meets an other mother and an other father who are weird and upbeat and happy. They're theatrical. There's a big musical performance. There's crazy bugs and monsters and things, and the rats talk and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't think the rats actually do talk, but the rats are sentient,
Right.
and the cat talks. But anyway, that world, the strange world, is inherently wrong and then must be kept separate. He describes it as a story about the dangers of a world that is crafted in opposition to the natural world of family and the ordinary. Um,
Mm.
you know, the lesson Coraline has to learn is, I need to return to my boring, not fulfilling mother, because at least she's ordinary and not a scary spider
Spider.
lady who is seeking to turn me into a monstrous doll human hybrid.
Right. Right.
And so he also says it's stop motion in Coraline is the marker of the unreal, the queer, the monstrously different, and animation opposes the natural. Um, and then describes how Coraline becomes sort of less feminist and more, sort of submits to the role of the dutiful daughter rather than the
Mm.
rebellious daughter by the end,
Okay.
even if it is by rebelling against the other mother.
Right.
Do you have a
Um,
different interpretation of the film, or do you concur with that one?
um, yeah, this is the first time I'm considering it in that specific mindset. And I definitely think it holds water. I don't think it's a misreading by any stretch. Um, I just don't know if that's like really what it was trying to convey. Um, I certainly think that is a message that someone could take from it, though.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
Yeah,
at the end of the day, it's sort of a question that you can ask about all like Alice in Wonderland narratives, where the
right.
fantasy world is alluring, but ultimately one must return to the world of the ordinary and the normal. There is no ending for the Alice in Wonderland story where you remain in this queer space of, you know, magic and unreason and silliness and goofiness and failure.
Hmm. Yeah, it's yeah. These portal to another world stories generally, they all have the eventual return to normalcy. And I
Right.
think you could argue that that is just kind of like basic storytelling. Like you start with a character somewhere, they go through a journey, and then they return having changed. um
Well, I mean, there's other analysis of story where it's all about thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and
mm,
there is no real synthesis going on in Coraline. It's just a rejection of the other, you know.
I mean, but doesn't she come back? I feel like she learns some stuff going
Right,
through
but
all of
what does
that.
she learn other than her wishes, her dreams, her imaginations of a mother who actually cares for her in the way that she wants her to? All of these things were merely deception, that they were just the allure of the queer world, which must be rejected in favor of the ordinary and the nuclear family.
Mm. All right, I can see that.
I don't know. It's something to consider. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to get to that because we were talking about the conservatism versus non-conservatism of
Yeah.
Nightmare Before Christmas, and I think there's some debate for that one as well.
Yeah. I mean,
There's
I
no
think it's
easy answer.
I think it's harder with Coraline because it is an adaptation of an existing work. So, like we can't put that on Henry Selick as like this was Henry Selick's vision to make this really conservative story,
No,
whereas like,
it's
Nightmare
about reading the mode of filmmaking, stop motion
yes.
itself,
Yeah.
as potentially uh, either queer or uncanny or
I,
these kind of things.
I do have trouble with that specific analysis though, just because the whole film is in stop motion. It's not like it goes from live action to stop motion when she crawls through the tunnel. It's stop motion the whole time. So
Right, but it's
even
stop
that,
motion of a very ordinary world versus stop
right?
motion of the stop motion becoming the film itself, that everything moves and everything reacts in this weird way. And there's that scene of the other father who plays piano, but in reality the piano is playing him, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is sort of a literal interpretation of stop motion, where there's these hands, these mechanisms that are unseen, that are controlling all of the movements of these figures,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I
I think that's
mean,
kind of an interesting sort of visual metaphor for what we're seeing. And if that is the world of control and the world of restriction and the world of being both dead and alive at the same time, as visualized by like the button eyes, then that's the spooky
mm-hmm.
world. And the return to the normal world, it's mundane. It's everything is stillness, and there isn't much color or liveliness, and there isn't much, uh, you know, incredible stop motion movement. But I can see what you're saying. Yeah, if the whole medium is supposed to be uncanny, then isn't the ordinary world uncanny as well? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think it certainly is like obviously the other world is much more uncanny. Like certainly agree with you there. But
And much
I
more
I
stop
think
motiony. I think is that it's both more uncanny and more animated.
I guess.
Well, that's
I don't
that's
know. I
certainly
think
what
there's
Halberstam would argue.
yeah,
I'm
I don't know if
I'm
I
just putting that out there.
necessarily no, yeah, I know. I'm saying I don't necessarily agree based on my recollection bleh, based on my recollection of the film. Um,
Right.
but yeah. I like where he's going with the with his basic thesis.
Right. So after Nightmare Before Christmas, we have a few more feature length animated films come out before Tim Burton tries again,
Mm-hmm.
and several more before several more years pass before Henry Selick tries again. Um, or I guess
Well,
first we have Henry Selick's next film, which was James and
yeah,
the Giant Peach,
James
which
the
was
Giant Peach live
partially
action.
stop motion animated, but partially live action.
Yeah, I would say definitely the majority is stop motion, and I almost think that the analysis that we were talking about for Coraline holds more water here, where where he's in the mundane world. It is live action,
Mm.
even though the mundane world holds some spooky, monstrous, gothic qualities to it to begin with. But then, he goes inside a peach and becomes stop motion and like dances around with spiders and whatnot. But in this way, I would say it resists a negative reading of that and almost has more of a positive connotation because what he's doing is escaping from an evil dull world which is trying to um can make him conform and make him less than. And he finds acceptance and love and self-confidence in this sort of monstrous
Among
stop motion
insects and
world.
spiders and
Right.
nasty things which have been
Yeah.
rejected. And
Yeah.
I wonder about this as well, because the insects, they're all different insects, of course, and they sort of have formed this collective that can be read kind of as a queer collective.
Yeah.
Um,
Very found family.
right, but it's still, I feel like the maybe the style of animation sort of resists it. Maybe the point is that it creates the, you know, these insects move like insects.
Mm.
Maybe that's supposed to be kind of disturbing to us, but also endearing because it's real. But
Mm.
you still have this sense that like there's these off-screen hands moving each individual piece. It's not a fluid motion of like cell animation where the artist's pen is completely hidden
Right.
by the movement, or where it becomes completely flat and two-dimensional. It's
Mm-hmm.
these are physical bodies that are still and moving at the same time. And so I wonder
Yeah.
if that animation style sort of contradicts the message of release from control.
That's an interesting thought. I hadn't considered that.
Then we've got some more Aardman pictures films. You know, the studio behind Wallace and Gromit. So they did
Mm-hmm.
Chicken Run and Wallace and Gromit: Curse of the Were Rabbit, both of which are somewhat horror based, I would say,
Yeah.
if not, you know, spooky based, Halloween based. Were Rabbit, I
Right.
guess, a little bit more so
Yeah.
than Chicken Run. But
There's
they're
some
both
dark
very
moments in
much
Chicken Run.
they're both very scary. Um, but yeah, I guess the idea here, Halberstam does reference Chicken Run, that the start-stop motion of the machines, that they're
Yeah.
always, the machines move very fluidly, and the chickens are always in danger of being processed by these machines.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with Wallace and Gromit, who are inventors, but their machines always end up controlling them.
Right.
That it becomes sort of a representation of capitalism, where the mechanisms that we create end up controlling us, and that
Yeah.
the stop motion reflects that as well. I don't know about that reading particularly either, but
Really, I feel like that one feels more compelling to me than some of the other arguments.
right. Well, I'm just mechanisms. I think are a big part of a lot of animation, and I don't know if they're
Right.
specific to stop motion in the way that the stop motion jerkiness, looking like a reanimated corpse, that feels very specific to stop motion to me.
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess takes us into our next major film to discuss, which is The Corpse Bride.
The Corpse
Um,
Bride.
do you like this film?
I didn't love it when I first watched it. I wanted it to be, I feel like, more feminist than it ended up being.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a feminist work. I think
No.
in having this female monstrous body, I think Halberstam would have a lot to say about that.
Yeah.
If he revisited the idea of the Bride of Frankenstein, which he talked about a lot in one of his earlier books.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what you would say about this movie, because it's just ultimately about marriage.
Yeah, and it's like it's just a weird rom-com with like spooky stuff that happens. Like I
Right.
think I totally
It's a
agree
love
with you.
triangle
Yeah.
between the living and the dead.
Yeah. And it's fine, I guess. I don't know. I don't care about their love triangle at all. This I don't understand why these women are fighting over this guy. He's very dull. uh,
He is dull, but he's rich.
yeah, it doesn't
He's the
seem worth
nouveau
it.
riche in Victorian England.
Dull, don't care, not interested. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot to say about Corpse Bride. Like
Really?
I don't know. It just feels like so like it's not an exciting film to me, like I remember watching it in
It's
theaters
not
as a
exciting, but I
kid.
think that's worth exploring.
Okay.
Why is it so dull? Why is this, critique not not working. They're trying to do the same thing as Edward Scissorhands or whatever.
Right.
Tim Burton's saying, okay, we're in Victorian London and we're having this big wedding that's just purely for appearances and for money. It's totally fakey fake wedding. And then we end up mixing the what is it, the sacred and the profane, is that the
Mm-hmm.
expression?
I think so.
We're mixing those by having death and skeletons involved with the church and marriage and these things. So at one
Yeah.
point you have this joke where a skeleton is like going to a wedding in a church and the priest is like, be gone, back, foul demons. And the skeleton just says, shh, be quiet, we're in a church. So
Yeah.
there's something's going on.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is very much like Tim Burton's like classic, like, what if there were kooky characters doing a very normal thing? Like, it feels very that, but without nearly as much critique as Edward Scissorhands of the norm necessarily.
Right. Of course, there is something kind of fun and potentially sort of revolutionary about stories about skeletons, right? I mean,
Yeah.
skeletons do not present any visible gender. They don't present any
And
visible
yet
race,
there's
but
so
because it's
much
in
gender.
Victorian London, it sort of defaults to white and defaults to uh,
Male.
male when they're wearing male clothes, or female where they're wearing female clothes, and there's no real queering of those
Mm-mm.
expectations.
Yeah. Um, yeah, there's a lot of potential with skeletons, but Tim Burton is not interested in the queer potential of skeletons. He's interested
Right,
in
but I
the
think it's also the constitution of the body, right? And
mm-hmm,
the corpse bride herself, she has a detachable arm, a detachable eye. She's rearrangeable, modifiable. Is that
mm-hmm,
part of her objectification, or is that part of her freedom of expression? She's not bound by the corporeal form that we are
mm.
typically. Um, or the
I
skeletons, when you see the skeletons like lifting their heads and placing them on each other's bodies, that our
yeah,
bodies are not these
vessels.
sacred things that must be kept whole and always one and never separated, or what's the word, when you chop something off,
Oh, dismembered?
they should never be dismembered or disembodied, but
Mm-hmm.
always kept together and in little boxes, but instead down there, downstairs in the
Mm-hmm.
underworld, everyone is free to just share their body parts around.
This is the future liberals want. Skeleton communism for everyone.
It's pretty good. I don't know. I think that one dance number is probably better than the rest of the movie. Is the
Yeah.
backstory of the corpse bride?
Yeah, I would agree. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think so like, it's only because the corpse bride herself resists her most monstrous qualities and, does try to downplay them and sort of is almost ashamed of them in certain ways. Like she starts out being like, yeah, this is just me and this is what it's like, and then,
Yeah.
is sort of like
Well, because he
shamed
shames
for
her
that.
for it, but then
Exactly, yeah.
eventually he comes around to it and is like, I'm just being bigoted against dead people. In fact, I'll kill myself right now, and I'll marry you because, you know. But that's the thing, is like, if it's all in the name of marriage, that's the
Right.
problem. Is like, if it was just like, I'm fine just killing myself because I just want to. Like, that would be
Right.
something else. Or I discovered that I love it down there and I hate it up here where it's all dim and grim and awful and
Right.
restrictive.
It's just sacrifice for monogamous love, which, is
Right.
pretty
uh
like
for
straightforward.
eternity, for the
Right.
spirit of eternal heterosexual devotion.
Right,
um
right.
there's something interesting though, because the marriage, it's almost never brought up that, like, the corpse bride presumably cannot have children,
Yeah.
right? Normally the feminine body in horror is always conceived as something that can bring life,
Mhm.
sometimes monstrous life, sometimes
Yeah.
life that shouldn't exist. There's a line in Frankenstein that's like, if I create a bride for this Frankenstein, will it will it bring a new race of demons into the world?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so there's a lot that that people have written about the problematics of the feminine monster.
Yeah.
But that's not really brought up here. That
No,
either
it's
they're
she's
just not
dead.
interested in having kids, or there's no question of like if there could there be undead
Right.
children.
Right. They'll just adopt, David. It's Victorian England. A lot of kids
A lot of
die.
kids die. Sure, yeah.
Uh,
Also, I want to address, this is the first digital stop motion animation film, so they could look at dailies instantly. They could see what the picture would look like on their screen. And as a result,
mhm.
they also had a lot of digital post production. So,
Yeah.
like, the veil was in some shots digital, in some shots
Mhm.
real.
Yeah, and I know we talked about Coraline before this, but Coraline, comes out a couple years after Corpse Bride chronologically, and that one used a ton of digital effects, along with the traditional stop motion.
Right. It's sort of it's sort of distorts the original intention of stop motion, right? I mean, the idea is that these things are the real. There's sort of an
Hmm.
objective, it's like the ontology of the photographic image by Andre Bazin. The objectif, the that we're capturing something real with film because it's a
Right.
chemical process.
I mean, like, yeah, like I think that is definitely an appeal to stop motion over traditional animation is that, we know that it was in a room somewhere, like that there were people moving this around and that if I went to a warehouse somewhere, I could touch all of these things,
Right. Yeah.
And I think that definitely there is an appeal to that and there's an appeal to, um, like there's a texture to it that isn't there in traditional animation, I think.
Right.
But I think that um I think that the use of digital enhancement around this, it might lose a little bit of that, but I think the people who are doing the enhancement, are very aware of what the goal of the medium is.
Well, I think let's just to skip ahead a little bit as we get further away from the original way that it was made. I think we see this even more. So in Corpse Bride, yes, there's some digital filmmaking going on. There's some CGI included. There's some digital compositing. There's some green screen, a
Hmm.
little bit here and there, and it's of course shot on a DSLR camera. I think it
Right.
was a Canon EOS 1D.
Hmm.
And so, but then in Coraline, yeah, the filmmaking is digital, and the Coraline faces, they're sculpted at first, but then they're
Hmm.
scanned into a computer, they're turned into a 3D model, and then they 3D print 800,000 variations on a single face,
Hmm.
and then they 3D print them out and then swap them, and then they put it back into a digital camera where then they remove the seam lines from the face digitally
Mm.
to kind of smooth everything out and make it look digitally smooth and good and
Right.
contiguous. So you're removing all of the physicality of the faces that was clearly present on Jack Skellington
Right. You're
in
moving
favor
the
of more expression, sure, but
right. Like
it
you're
loses
you're
that uncanniness and the roughness of
right. Like you're almost losing the fingerprint in the clay.
right.
Um
I mean, there's
and
literally no fingerprint and there's literally no clay. They're
right,
plastic
exactly.
printed
Right.
pieces. But I mean, not only are you losing the
Metaphorically.
fingerprint, right? But I mean, not only are you losing the metaphoric, fingerprint in the clay, you're also losing, you know, just you're losing even the illusion that it's not digital, that it's real, that it could exist
Mhm.
in the world. Um,
Mhm.
I think you do lose it to an extent. And then by the time you get to Paranorman, even the coloring is done
Yeah.
uh, is
Post.
done through the 3D printer,
Yeah.
and it just becomes a sort of like where does it and then in Paranorman you also have so much digital compositing going on
Yeah.
because there are ghosts and they're partially see-through, and they have green auras. And it's like, at what point? Okay, so what we're doing is we're taking a physical sculpture, scanning it into a computer, printing it back out, and
Mm-hmm.
then taking a picture on a digital camera, putting it back into a computer, and then digitally compositing it. So we're
Yeah.
we're making the transition from the digital to the real like 4 times every frame.
Right.
Isn't that like kind of a mind fuck?
But I mean, I feel like that's what a lot of modern movie making is, you know, like there's as much digital enhancement on that as there is in, you know, your average action flick that you
Right, and of
see at the
course a
theater.
3D digitally computer animated movie is
Right.
entirely digital and there's no transition. It's entirely simulated, and that's
Right.
fine. But I'm just saying, like, then if there's this many sort of medium shifts between the real and the digital,
Mm-hmm.
the real and the virtual, I guess. What is to distinguish it from VFX, from CGI? What is to
Right.
distinguish it?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, especially at this point when, you know, CGI has evolved to the point where doing textures in like completely
Right, they can
computer
do it pretty
generated
well,
forms,
and they can
they
do
can
light
do it
effects
really
really
well.
well.
Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
the early, the Tim Burton style of stop motion is largely defined by this very like German expressionist looking lighting that's sort of
mhm.
borrowed from the early Universal movie monsters, where
Yeah.
Jack Skellington, his shadows are more expressive than he is even,
Mhm.
and they're big shadows and very like hard shadows.
Right. Lots of hard and soft, not hard and soft light, hard light transitions. You know, it's dark
Yeah,
over there, it's light over
the
here.
chiaroscuro, or I'm sure I'm
Oh,
pronouncing that wrong, but it's
you're
it's this kind of
you're pulling out all the fancy film school lingo in this one. I love it. Getting
yeah.
learned.
I want to share anything that I've kind of picked up
Yeah. No, I
with you
love it.
guys.
I love
Um,
it.
so if that's gone, if that's missing now, and
Hmm.
we might as well just go to digital light. We might as well just go to digital dust particles floating in the wind and
Right.
digital textures. And when I saw the Lego movie, I was not 100% sure that it wasn't stop motion. It was
Yeah.
not stop motion,
It's
but I
it's
but I thought maybe it could be.
because it's animated to reflect that style. Like there's just enough jerkiness to it and there's just enough weight to all of the characters, you know, that you get a sense that like this might be real, you
Right. This
know.
might exist.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we know it doesn't. And at
Yeah.
the end of the day, we know that there are actually these seam lines on Coraline's face that
Right.
you can get rid of them, but we see that there's digital effects going on. Or maybe we
Right.
don't see
Right.
it, but we know
It's, you know, in the same way they digitally remove all the hair off of women in movies.
it. Right. Yeah, everything has a smoothness to it in
Yeah.
the digital age,
Yeah.
in this current decade we live in. Everything's too
Right.
smooth. The smoothing of culture, the
So
smoothing of politics, the smoothing of humanity.
yeah. I there's, you know, so we've got a whole list of stop motion films in our notes doc, and I noticed that Fantastic Mr. Fox is on here, which is a Wes Anderson production.
Right.
And this, you know, is certainly not done with clay. There's in fact a lot of there's a lot
Foam
of
taxidermy, sort of
yeah,
fake
right.
taxidermy.
There's a lot of fur to it, and
Yeah.
you know, thinking to the Isle of Dogs, which what did that come out in 2018, something
Sounds
like
right.
that. Um, you know, like that another one that has a lot of like fur and like movement to that fur, and I feel like
But less
the
movement to the fur than can be done in CGI now, and less realistic fur
absolutely,
than can be done in CGI.
absolutely. But I think it's interesting that, you know, while sort of clay doll looking clay like doll looking stuff
Mm-hmm.
has sort of made this transition towards you know, looking more and more CGI and looking more and more smooth and less rough. The Wes Anderson produced films, um they definitely still have a lot of that jerkiness and
Very much so.
piecemealness to them. Like you even see it with the character models. You know, if someone is naked, it still looks like there's a head in a socket and like arms in a socket. They still look like dolls in
Right.
a sense.
Yeah. Halberstam, I'm not going to go into the whole analysis of it because it's not very Halloweeny, but
Uh-huh.
Halberstam identifies Fantastic Mr. Fox as like the most queer friendly um, stop motion animated film, that he had seen
Yeah.
up to that point.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
just yeah, check out his book, Queer Art of Failure.
yeah.
The thesis statement is kind of like the queer art of failure involves the acceptance of the finite, the embrace of the absurd, the silly, and the hopelessly goofy. And I think that
Mm,
that's something we all need.
yeah.
It opens with a passage from SpongeBob. It's very fun. It's a very fun, readable book.
I'm gonna order it right now. This sounds great. Yeah, but so it's interesting that I think what you were saying ultimately about the digital sort of smoothing everything, it's almost taking some of the monstrousness from these monster films in a
Right.
way.
Because
Um,
it's pixels on a screen printed out. It might as well be, yeah, it might as well be a 3D printed model of a head that you just made in your own. It's something that you can do
right.
now. We've
This is
taken 3D printing and we've made it everywhere. It's a part of
right.
industrial processes now. It's a
So
part of
it almost
capitalism.
right. So it almost whatchamacallit, like hmm uh, in the same way that, you know, like puppetry, as it becomes more and more digital, it becomes slightly less uncanny.
Right.
I think, you know, this is all becoming less and less uncanny, and so I think, you know, we'll probably continue to see monster movies made in this style. But, you know, we haven't really had a monster stop motion movie since like what, 2012?
Uh, yeah, basically. I mean, you could say that there are monsters in like
The
Kibo
box
and the two
trolls.
screens, two
Right, but
strings,
it's
or
right, but that's more like adventure fantasy than it is
right. I
you
mean,
know,
it's sort of
horror.
merging with any other kind of animation. It's
Right.
sort of because and of course Aardman Studios has never been beholden to all Christmas or all Halloween. That's a
Right.
purely American concept. So
Right.
part of this is the globalization of stop motion animation as well.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. Although I do want to say, sort of to contrast Paranorman with the film that came out the same year from Tim Burton, Frankenweenie, which, like we
Mhm.
said, is a remake of his original film in the style that he would have wanted to make it. These are not face swaps that he's doing for these characters, and it wasn't for Corpse Bride either. They are all
Mm.
extremely intricate puppet machines that are being
Mm.
adjusted like manually to make different stretchy face shapes, um, you
Hmm.
know, that are slightly different from the previous one. And they do some of that in
Mhm.
Paranorman as well, especially with the zombie characters. But
Okay.
all of the all of the main characters are these face swapping, more or less CG characters.
Yeah.
And so I think there is something fundamentally different that the Frankenweenie dog, who is not a weenie dog. Did you notice that?
No. Yeah, it's not a wiener dog.
He looks like a bull terrier, right?
Yeah.
He is a bull terrier in the original live action.
Yeah, no, he is just a bull terrier. He's not a weenie at all.
Not a weenie, but he is a robot, a machine, a puppet that can be
Yeah.
just minutely changed to move the eyes around and to squeeze the different parts to make different shapes. So I
Mhm.
think there is something still very viscerally appealing about that style as compared to the face swapping. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Maybe other people would disagree with me that they like it smooth. Maybe people like
Yeah.
it smooth.
Tell us what you guys like. Tweet at us at Talking Tropes to tell us, do you like your horror smooth or do you like it gritty and real?
Right.
What kind of horror fan are you? What kind of stop motion fan are you?
Right. Do
Do
you
you
think that
like
this is,
these
that you're
movies?
glad this is over, maybe? That you're
Yeah.
glad that there's no more spooky stop motion, and that stop motion has entered the realm of the mythic and the big
And the
uh,
mundane.
and the mundane and all these things, and that it almost looks like CGI, but there's you can still tell that it's real just because of the way that things
Mm-hmm.
look. Are you a Harryhausen guy who wants more skeletons, more clay skeletons in your action
More
movies?
skeletons all the time.
Right. Oh yeah, we didn't really bring up like the fact
Everywhere.
that Tim Burton loves his Ray Harryhausen. Uh, he
Yeah.
loves those skeletons attacking the Argonauts in that one movie. So he likes skeletons
Just
because
like
skeletons
skeletons.
were stop motion, not the other
Yeah.
way around.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, so I mean that's all I've got. Any final words or thoughts, David?
I think we've pretty much covered it. Oh, I guess we should say about Paranorman, since we brought it up, that yeah, neither Selig nor Tim Burton worked on that, but the
Yeah.
one of the directors of it, Chris Butler, also worked on Corpse Bride and Coraline, I think, as a storyboard
So,
artist.
has
So
worked with both Selick and Burton.
right, so it's all, that's the thing about like American stop motion animation, is it like almost doesn't exist. It is such a small niche group, um, that it's nice to give them the props that they deserve, because they do a ton of great work, but it's almost
Yeah.
all unrecognized. So
So many
yeah,
people that work on these
support your stop motion animators, support them, love
in
them.
your life.
They're not all, what's his name
Ben
from Parks
Wyatt.
and Rec,
Yeah, Ben Wyatt.
Ben Wyatt making Requiem for a Tuesday. Was
Depression.
that?
Right. Yep. Making depression stop motion in their living rooms.
Right.
It's fine. So
Yeah.
on that note, have a happy
Yep.
Halloween.
Spooky Halloween, where you don't trick or treat.
And don't
Don't trick or
forget to
treat, guys.
vote.
Right.
Don't trick or treat and do vote. All right. See you next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.